Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Corey Hughes' Bloody History. And looks like we're good to go. So, today what we're going to do is we're going to go over this paper. It was a doctoral level thesis recently written called Otto Skorzeny and the Real Conduct of the Unternehmen-Eich und Unternehmen-Panzerfaust. Fucking German, man. So, let us begin. Introduction. Overview. During World War II and thereafter until today, enthusiasts of the chronicles of war have referred to Otto Skorzeny as the most dangerous man in Europe. The Austrian SS Obersturmbannführer successfully led several high-value target special operations for Germany at the war's height. He stepped into the World War II limelight to become one of the most renowned German officers from this period. After the Allied defeat of the Axis powers in 1945, he embarked on his second career, more notable still to use his knowledge and fame in a shadow world of the Cold War. He established a reputation for European right-wing activities as a political refugee, and he may have collaborated with the Israeli Mossad, and overall he crafted a personal legend and legacy. He was charged with the Dachau military tribunal in August of 1945, but was found not guilty, and escaped as a fugitive to Spain, where he was secured by the nationalist Franco regime to become possibly imprisoned for a time because of his name on the Israeli list of German war criminals. There he finally died in 1975, and his remains are interred in the family plot in the green splendor of Vienna Dobling, the elegant 19th district. Unternehmen-Eich, the rescue of Italian dictator Benito Mussolini at Gran Sasso in 1943, was Otto Skorzeny's primary special operation, which made him famous and highly decorated. This operation was crucial for Germany because its success kept part of Italy on her side and therefore prolonged the war in southern Europe and kept Allied forces from reaching Germany quickly. Comparable to Unternehmen-Eich, the successful Unternehmen-Panzerfaust, supposedly Skorzeny-led operation in Budapest in 1944, targeted the Hungarian regent Admiral Miklos Horthy. The Hungarian negotiation with the advancing Soviet Red Army would have cut off German divisions still fighting in the Balkans and in the process of withdrawal, as well as those units in the east resisting the Soviet advance. The success of Unternehmen Panzerfaust and the replacement of the Hungarian regent allowed the war in southeastern Europe to continue with ultimately catastrophic results, not least for Hungary in the final phase of the war, but it did allow the successful retreat of nearly 1 million German soldiers. National Socialist propaganda and Otto Skorzeny used these two special operations to create a biographical legend which is still alive and taught today in the history of special operations, not so much as an expression of Nazi ideas as of military excellence more or less disconnected from biography, politics, and society of the time. This fact notwithstanding, the time is ripe for a reinterpretation of this story in the interests of the historical record. Moreover, there is also a need to join excellence in professional military education with the highest standards of historical scholarship, especially as that of the German-speaking world has an impact on an English-language readership. Skorzeny may have used the situational opportunity presented by Nazi propaganda at the climax of the war to become famous, but along with many other figures of the world's biggest war, he also created his own story after the war. Understanding these historical discrepancies between fact and fiction, what was his real role in the origin, planning, execution, and aftermath of German high-value target special operations in World War II? Context for those devoted to the study of special operations and its application in practice in a violent world of irregular conflict. The Austrian Otto Skorzeny is akin to Guderian or Rommel for mobile warfare in the annals of war, especially in English-speaking countries where German and Austrian military figures enjoy more fame than at home today. His military reputation and fame is enormous. The first time he was recognized during World War II was after Nazi propaganda used the successful rescue operation of Mussolini in September of 1943 to demonstrate the Third Reich's military resilience and sustained power in the face of major strategic setbacks and alliance cohesion as Allied offensive against the Axis unfolded in southern and eastern Europe. This operation in the Apennine Mountains was a launching pad not only for the Feisler Storch aircraft that rescued the Duce, but for Otto Skorzeny and his global recognition and credit. Before this operation, he was an unknown person even in Germany, a common soldier, like many other Germans and Austrian men at the time in the ranks of the SS. Special operations conducted by Otto Skorzeny always seemed to be successful and were employed by German propaganda, but were likewise well reported by Allied forces and their home press. Every individual operation became a stepping stone for Otto Skorzeny's military fame. This growing global reputation started in September 1943 with Unternehmen Eiche and continued with Unternehmen Rosselsprung, which targeted the Yugoslav communist guerrillas fighting the Nazi rule in occupied Yugoslavia and their leader, Josip Broz Tito. In October of 1944, Unternehmen Panzerfaust was conducted in Budapest to keep Hungary on the Axis side of the war and had deep impact on German political and military strategy. Most renowned in the United States were, and still are, Unternehmen Grief in December 1944, when Skorzeny's men conducted a false flag operation during so-called Battle of the Bulge, or the Ardennes Offensive, and the planned Nazi underground resistance movement in post-war Germany, the Werwolf SS. Also, the rumored Unternehmen Weizsprung to kill Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill during the Tehran Conference in 1943 built Skorzeny's popularity. All these operations are still connected to the man named Skorzeny and supposedly illustrate his cleverness, tactical knowledge, and courage. Literature review, especially in the English language literature, but in Germany and Austria as well, contemporary authors still rely mostly on Skorzeny's autobiographical works and personal accounts about special operations during World War II. Even today, he is a household name in the successful conduct of special operations. His influence has been pervasive. For example, his idea of a German resistance movement called Werwolf after the German defeat has even been said to have influenced terroristic organizations like Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State and their irregular tactics taught by the Americans and the Mossad. While Unternehmen Eiche was crucial for Germany's war strategy and for Skorzeny's career, this operation is also the first high-value target special operation in modern times, and is used as the perfect case study to teach soldiers and military leaders how to conduct a successful operation. Skorzeny is described as the one who received the order to rescue Mussolini personally from Adolf Hitler, planned the whole operation, conducted reconnaissance on his own, and led his men with the support of German paratroopers to operational success with large strategic gains. Awards and honors in the aftermath supposedly confirmed his lead responsibility. On the other hand, there is some increasing doubt since the 1980s in the United States about his involvement in this operation that follow the doubts that first arose in Germany and Europe much earlier in those skeptical of his fame at the time. Paratroopers claimed the honor for conducting Unternehmen Eiche soon after, but criticism of Skorzeny was suppressed and therefore he was officially still the operational hero. Similar doubts can be raised about their Unternehmen Panzerfaust. Although this operation is less documented and analyzed, its impact on German warfighting was important. Authors who describe this special operation are again influenced by Otto Skorzeny's own accounts. Repeatedly, planning and successful execution are described as being ordered by Skorzeny. Reportedly tasked by Adolf Hitler, he went in civilian clothes to Budapest and took the Hungarian regent's son hostage, attacking the palace and pressuring the regent Horthy to resign as head of state. So the reason I'm fucking chuckling here is because at a certain point in time you realize that the introduction of propaganda to everyone completely skews the true historical record, right? in hindsight, it's probably pretty fucking obvious that most of Skorzeny's heroic feats were more feats of propaganda than they were actual feats of military success. The idea of propaganda really is that it is packaged nice and neatly and then distributed to both friend and enemy. Right? So that should tell you something about the ultimate aims of propaganda. That the people who are behind it don't really care who it affects or how. As already described, in reference to Unternehmen Eich, most U.S. military historians and writers honoring Otto Skorzeny based their work on his autobiography, personal accounts, and his awards and honors in the aftermath of these operations. Again, his military genius on a tactical special operations level is highlighted by articles and book chapters for studying military students. There is a difference between U.S. authors and German and European writers, the latter two who are more critical about the role that Skorzeny played in the conduct of these special operations. These German authors argued diplomatic negotiations had a bigger impact on the ongoing Wehrmacht operation to occupy Hungary, which seemed to be more effective in, in influencing Horthy's decision to resign and let Ferenc Szalasi become dictator of a pro-Nazi governed Hungary. These critiques do not deny that Skorzeny was there and did take action that contributed to the outcome. After reviewing current authors who write about these two Skorzeny-led operations, I want to focus on a third concern about Skorzeny's legacy, which also is used by different authors in various ways. World War II and its military operations have primary sources available in a size that fill archives of the ex-combatant nations. Official documents, official reports, and memoirs of people at the time describe events, relationships, and connections. A distinction should thus be made between the record of the war as visible in such documents and the autobiographical iteration of conflict and fighting that quickly emerged in the war's wake and for which a major market existed well beyond Germany. To say nothing of the interests of the defeated to shine a positive light on what often had been criminal behavior or an enterprise that had ended in catastrophic defeat. It is remarkable to write in 2017 that Otto Skorzeny's autobiography has been used and cited by nearly every author writing about him. But there are just a few writers who doubt Skorzeny's descriptions and cross-check his accounts. Memoirs, interviews, and film clips of those participants or otherwise involved persons in Skorzeny's special operations are rarely used and cited. Again, there is a difference between U.S. authors and German and European writers because the memoirs and interviews of, for instance, the paratrooper general Kurt Student, Harold Moore's Benito Mussolini's son, or Miklos Horthy are only used by the latter two. Even available official documents and reports which contradict and challenge Skorzeny's accounts about Budapest are only cited in a single German article. Interestingly, Dudersberg writes about a special type of post-war literature which follows, on the one hand, the descriptive narrative of National Socialist propaganda, and on the other hand, satisfied the German veteran needs of a German crimeless free-fought war. Therefore, most former high-ranking senior officers as authors used a mixture of autobiographical content and fictional, adventurous narrative. Otto Skorzeny's books are seen in this type of post-war literature and follow these lines of satisfying German post-war veteran readers. Approach in order to better understand the circumstances surrounding these two special operations, the thesis will start by providing the strategic environment during the conduct of these two German missions. It will focus on the German, Italian, and Hungarian perspectives individually to explain what led to changes inside the countries and during the war, which influenced Germany to plan and conduct special operations during these phases of World War II. With the purpose to answer the question of what Otto Skorzeny's real role in German World War II special operations was, a chapter of this thesis will focus on critiques about Skorzeny's narrative of his involvement in German special operations. This thesis will rely on the critical comparison of primary sources. This literature will be mostly German, but the thesis will also use Skorzeny's interview as a prisoner of war after his capture by American soldiers in 1945. Autobiographies, biographies of German and foreign military and government personnel involved in special operations, and official German government and military documents will be crucial to this undertaking when levied against a more or less uncritical English language literature which suffers from a lack of detail and especially lack of context. The validation of literature and its description of Skorzeny's role will be based on a comparison of Skorzeny's autobiography, My Commando Operations, to other sources. This research aspires to identify those parts of the narrative that are contested by more than one other participant. Official documents will be rare for this thesis, but as far as they are available through the German Bundesarchiv, they will be used for answering the research question. Secondary sources like regimental history, books about Skorzeny himself, and articles about German special operations will help to reconstruct these German special operations and Skorzeny's role if primary sources will not provide the needed information for the thesis. This will be interesting to see how he puts this together. The limitation of this literature is based on availability. Many official German documents are still unavailable because of their classification, which was determined during or after the war by Allied forces or governments, or because they were burned during the defeat of Germany. Also, witnesses or members of the conducted operations are no longer available since it's already 70 years since the war's end. Their accounts are mostly lost if they were not written down and or published in the time immediately after the war. On the following pages, this thesis will concentrate on two German special operations which were both successful, had a major impact on the ongoing war, and contributed to and augmented Otto Skorzeny's fame. The first case will be Unternehmen Eiche in 1943, the rescue operation of Italy's dictator Mussolini and the beginning of Skorzeny's fame. This special operation is still today used as a model case study to teach young officers how to conduct special operations, and illustrated how closely connected Skorzeny's name is to the operation. The second case, Unternehmen Panzerfaust in 1944, was again a high-value target special operation because the Hungarian regent Horthy had to be caught up to keep Hungary on the Axis side of the war to fight against the Soviet Union. This thesis will use these two examples to describe the missions and ascertain Skorzeny's actual role in special operations. By concentrating on just two German special operations, this may create an incomplete picture and characterization of Skorzeny than if the thesis reviewed all of Skorzeny's special operations. Further academic work may describe his role in the other operations. This ongoing work would provide a better characterization, but two successfully conducted German special operations and analysis of Skorzeny's involvement can at least suggest a more realistic and less legend-based account of his role in these operations. In this thesis, both operations will be divided into different phases: origin, planning, execution, and aftermath. By using this scheme, the reader will easily be able to trace Skorzeny's impact and influence in order to form a more accurate picture of his participation and the operations as a whole, distinguishing both special operations as the most logical way to achieve these goals. After the analysis of the two historical case studies, a following chapter concentrates on Skorzeny's strategic value. It will describe how Skorzeny achieved strategic impact for Germany on its domestic population, internal SS volunteer recruiting, World War II politics and military, and on Germany's adversaries and their warfighting. Furthermore, according to the findings in the critical analysis chapter, a chapter will provide accurate accounts of how the Unternehmen Eiche and Unternehmen Panzerfaust were conducted. Primary sources concerning the conduct of these operations will be compared and cross-referenced with Skorzeny's personally produced narrative in order to gain a clearer and more realistic account. The conclusion will summarize the findings of his involvement and similarities in both cases, and will show the real role Skorzeny played in the different phases of German special operations, which will further enhance the reader's understanding of Skorzeny's real contributions to the conduct of special operations. The summary also has to differentiate between the different phases of special operations because the findings lead to various contributions and end states during these different phases. When compared, discrepancies paint a more accurate picture of Otto Skorzeny's real contributions. All right. Strategic environment. General. Both special operations took part in a crucial environment of Germany's warfighting situation in which the Reich and its Axis allies suffered ever more under the blows of the Allied offensive. Skorzeny claims Unternehmen Eich and Unternehmen Panzerfaust as his independently planned and executed missions, which saved Germany's military from defeat prior to May 8th of 1945. The following sections of this thesis will describe the political and military environment of the successfully conducted German special operations, while Chapter 4 will focus on the strategic value and the result of Skorzeny's missions. Unternehmen Eich. Since 1943, the Italian popular support for the Italian military fighting on the German side against Allied forces was decreasing in the face of the Allied offensive, first in North Africa, then in Sicily. The defeat in Tunisia in May of 1943 and the Allied bombing raids against Italian cities forced the Italian population and elites to oppose Germany and Axis strategic goals. During Operation Husky, Allied forces started their invasions on smaller islands ahead of Sicily on June 11, 1943, and attacked Sicily on July 10, 1943. Allied amphibious operations and airborne operations supported the landing on Sicily, while German and Italian troops withdrew up until August 17th of 43. As a result of the Allies landing on Sicily, the Grand Council of Fascism revolted against Il Duce and abolished the power of Mussolini, which they transferred to mostly to the Italian king Victor Emmanuel III. The king informed Mussolini about his decision to form a new government under the head of Pietro Badoglio, who was the former chief of Italian High Command. The Italian paramilitary force, the Carabinieri, imprisoned Mussolini. King Emmanuel III did not want to continue the war with Germany against the Allied forces, and therefore Pietro Badoglio contacted the Allied forces to negotiate a ceasefire and to surrender. The leadership of the German military feared that the Italian surrender would facilitate the Allied attack to the north, which would threaten the German homeland. The Italian ceasefire at the beginning of September 43 manifested this German fear, and German troops began forcibly to demilitarize Italian units. In this political and military environment, Germany launched Unternehmen Eich on September 12, 1943. Unternehmen Panzerfaust. For Hungary, as for Germany, the final destruction of the 6th Army at Stalingrad in early 43 and the following battles altered perceptions and opinions about the war and the probability of victory. The Hungarian regent, Miklos Horthy, was looking for opportunities to end the war. Since August 43, the Hungarian government had been in contact with Allied forces in an attempt to become aligned with them. German intelligence noticed Hungary's negotiations, but until Italy's attempt to surrender, nothing happened. Since the end of 43, the German military planned Unternehmen Margarethe, which aimed to occupy Hungary and avoid a situation similar to what happened in Italy. In spring of 43, the German military completed mission planning, and Adolf Hitler authorized Unternehmen Margarethe to be launched on March 19, 1944. 8 German divisions occupied Hungary, and Germany led a newly installed government under Prime Minister Dome Stoche. At this point, a large part of the Hungarian population already supported communist movements and conducted irregular warfare against the German authorities. In August of 1944, the Red Army reached Romania, which surrendered, switched sides, and declared war on Germany. The Hungarian regent Horthy recognized the disadvantage of the Axis situation and tried to negotiate his country's surrender with the Soviets. Deserting and dissenting Hungarian soldiers had already been fighting in large numbers on the side of the Red Army, while German and regular Hungarian troops paired defensive positions to stop the Soviet attacks. Conclusion. During crucial phases in the war, the German military conducted Unternehmen Eich and Unternehmen Panzerfaust in a sensitive strategic environment of the collapse of the Axis flanks in the south and the east, a mortal danger to German domination of the continent. Up until these special operations, German troops and Axis powers had been fighting the Allies and the Red Army. A major loss of Germany's Allies' support would have had severe consequences: loss of those countries' manpower, support services, and bureaucratic operations that provided internal security for the German forces. All of these factors would have resulted in significant loss of German forces. if they were cut off or exposed by an Axis ally surrender. Critiques. The record of German soldiers in World War II is a rich and complex one and forms part of world history in an astonishing way. Books, films, and the propaganda of the time are omnipresent in the public mind. Noteworthy, however, amid the renaissance of writing about war and soldiers in Germany itself, has been the singular trend in historiography to examine the post-war careers of notable German soldiers and particularly their currying of fame and notoriety in the immediate post-war years. In this connection, the story of Austrian SS leader Otto Skorzeny stands out as ripe for the kind of reinterpretation that has lately characterized a rich scholarship on those wartime personalities who stood out in the headlines in wartime and thereafter. This analysis of the biography and operational deeds of Skorzeny in fact and legend, as well as his conduct of special operations, will be divided into three parts. The first part concentrates on general analysis about Skorzeny's involvement and credibility in the two special missions this thesis concentrates: the Mussolini Gran Sasso event in 1943 and the seizure of the Hungarian head of state Horthy in 1944. The second part will focus on Unternehmen Eich and the criticism about Skorzeny during this special operation to rescue the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini at Gran Sasso. The third Skorzeny critique will be about Unternehmen Panzerfaust, which targeted the Hungarian regent Admiral Miklos Horthy in Budapest. All three case studies will allow the reader to develop a clear view of Otto Skorzeny's real role in those two famous cases, renowned in legend, and its value for conducting these special operations as an analysis of the past as it has implications for the present and those who must act in the face of danger. General. This section provides general criticism about Skorzeny's involvement and conduct of the two special operations on which this thesis focuses. The following critiques have value for both case studies but may also be used for further research on Skorzeny's special operation because of some overall criticism about Skorzeny's ability to conduct special operations. This question has merit for the author as a special operations veteran and scholar, but also for scholarship in a general sense associated with the story of the Wehrmacht and the SS in the 20th century and even beyond. This section will suggest that there are reasonable doubts which will lead to the assumption that Otto Skorzeny might not have conducted the two special missions, Unternehmen Eich and Unternehmen Panzerfaust, precisely in the way he described in the decades after the war to all who would eagerly listen to this startling figure. I suggest at the outset that the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, beset as it was by SS men oriented to the West and less friendly SS men oriented to Moscow, who did not trust Skorzeny overall, most important and a fact that becomes lost in the celebration of military feats of the armed SS when compared to the military competency of NATO officers in the 21st century. Skorzeny did not have much military knowledge about tactical or operational use of military units. Indeed, he belonged to the SS, Sicherheitsdienst, and not the small number of Waffen-SS figures who had enjoyed some degree of military training and education at higher echelons of command, if at all, and such men were very few indeed. The SD was yet again the party of intelligence organization that had morphed one of the security policy entities in the Third Reich and occupied Europe, which as an organization did not train and facilitate its officer corps with command of tactical echelons for combat operations. Reinhard Heydrich himself was a failed naval officer cashiered for ethics infractions who was prone to gather educated men around him in the SD, but these tended to be lawyers and racial ethnologists as opposed to trained company or field-grade officers. The SD was an internal security organization intended for espionage, totalitarian control, and once conquest began for the realization by secret police and state terror means the control of subject populations. I'm pretty sure the phrase totalitarian control was not in the SD book of general operations. After World War II, American soldiers captured Otto Skorzeny and interrogated him at Dachau, which became a U.S. barracks, a prison, and the site of war crimes trials. Later on, once Skorzeny escaped to Franco's Spain, the newly formed CIA, which grew out of the OSS, observed him and documented their observations. These CIA documents will show that the U.S. was well informed about Skorzeny, not just after World War II, but also before. Skorzeny is described as not particularly gifted with administrative or executive talents. He's recognized as being overvalued by his own importance. The CIA knew that he was seen as an upstart by German staff officers and comrades, that Otto Skorzeny was not as intelligent as he stated himself, and that he is childlike in many ways, according to a CIA source. All these descriptions do not fit into the picture of Otto Skorzeny, generally drawn by National Socialist propaganda, or later by himself to his credulous public. Because of this fact, unlike other SS men who might have been useful in the incipient Cold War and the requirement to fight the Soviets, the CIA was never interested in working with Skorzeny. He still never had skills which would be useful, although he was part of the most recognized special operations during World War II. Originally a member of the illegal Vienna SS, known for its... Actually, no, something. Let me comment real quickly on this. Here this guy says that the CIA was never interested in working with Skorzeny. Okay? You will find the same goddamn sentence about Clay Shaw and David Ferry and Guy Bannister and all these guys who we can prove working with the CIA. The CIA saying we had no operational interest in them, right? So I hate when I come across researchers who will read the CIA documents and then just take the CIA at their word. It's really unfucking real how many people do that. That's what makes research so complex, because you can't trust the authority. You can't trust the people who are supposed to be telling us the truth, right? FBI, CIA, can't trust any fucking thing they say. Everything that's said has to be put in context and have corroboration and a bunch of other stuff, right? So this is lazy. It's just lazy work. Originally a member of the illegal Vienna SS, known for its terror activities in the illegal period of the NSDAP. That's the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the NSDAP. The SA, the brown shirts, and the SS. After 1933 and prior to 1938, once the Anschluss took hold, Otto Skorzeny's military career began in 1939 when he tried to join the Luftwaffe. He then got transferred to the Waffen-SS because he was not qualified to become a pilot. During his military career, he received no or only minor tactical and operational military education in the classical sense of those who customarily lead troops in combat at higher echelons of command. Therefore, he was never capable of understanding and directing troops in a traditional military sense, and was even, by his further chief of staff, Wilhelm Walter, never seen by those who were the graduates of such training and education as being an officer. Skorzeny himself described his training as that of a Technischer officer in his books in his basic training at the Waffen-SS, but there is no further classical education or training mentioned for his command at the tactical or operational level as enjoyed by certain Waffen-SS officers in their small numbers, who were indeed party to traditional army, professional military education, which might has developed or increased his tactical, operational, and strategic capacity in his military biography. Minor trainings on mostly technical issues characterized his time as battalion commander of the ZBV Friedenthal, thus conducting military operations without much understanding of tactics, especially if it is about special operations with specialized units. Having special equipment and operating on difficult circumstances is nearly impossible. This missing military tactical operational knowledge also was not developed over time, as Unternehmen Grief from December 16th to December 28th, 1944 showed, and is perceived by historians. Also, his daughter, Waltraud Ries, described her father, Otto Skorzeny, as being mostly interested in technical issues, as would befit an engineering student, and being a Horgen und Draufgänger, but not being an intellectual in the classical sense of the educated German officer. Therefore, again, also his studies during the war might be mostly directed into technological development and not into the use of special tactical operational art to fight against Germany's adversaries. Into this also comes Skorzeny's military position until he became commander of the battalion ZBV Friedenthal. He was a Technischer officer, that is to say, combat support services, in several armed SS divisions, so that even until 1943 he never garnered experience for tactical leadership of soldiers in combat. It is also interesting that although the divisions in which he served were involved in campaigns in France and Russia, he never was especially recognized as being heroic, outstanding, or courageous in these actions. This fact is also a reason why Otto Skorzeny was not decorated and honored until 1943. The transfer of Otto Skorzeny in 1943 from the Waffen-SS to the ZBV Friedenthal is only understandable if the reason for this special unit is clear. The battalion was created for the special purpose of conducting Unternehmen Zeppelin, which targeted the Soviet Union. This operation was conducted by Amt, I'm not even going to try to read that, and its aim was to gather information about the Soviet population and economy, to sabotage crucial infrastructure, conduct assassinations, and to lead revolts against the Soviets. One should also note that the command entities that guided the war in the East and managed German and Axis policies in the conquered Eastern territories constituted a whole government in Nazi Germany that beggars the mind of a contemporary observer, with its cross purposes and overlapping lines of command and control. Skorzeny's role is part of this highly conflicted instrument of power, which beggars the mind of someone familiar with security sector organization in the 21st century. One might even compare this SS-RSHA campaign somewhat with the personalities and tactics of what today is called a hybrid war. But the takeaway here is manifestly this undertaking was but poorly coordinated with traditional military channels of command, and was not a military operation in its classical sense, but still a strategic special operation. But already at the beginning of this operation, the responsible SS Sturmbannführer, Dr. Heinz Graf, mentioned that this operation may only cause minor nuisance because of the minor reliability of agents who were found at prisoner of war camps. Himmler wanted to use this situation for his own purpose, to make the SS more important and to bolster his influence because of the lack of Wehrmacht capabilities to conduct this operation. By the beginning of 1943, the results of the Unternehmen Zeppelin were getting worse, so that the whole concept had to be rethought. The need for men who were able to operate with radios and operate behind enemy lines was highlighted. And thus the special battalion ZBV Friedenthal was created. This explains why SS Sturmbannführer Otto Skorzeny got the position of the commanding officer. It was not because he was recognized as a man with great ideas and a heroic military background, but because his technical studies before the war, his position of an engineering officer, and his membership to the SS. Skorzeny described his position of being solely commanded by Reichsführung SS and RSHA, but this is not true. According to the personnel synthesis, which was created by the headquarters of ZBV Friedenthal, the new Gruppe 6S, the members of this group were members of the RSHA, the Waffen-SS, the Wehrmacht, and the volunteering Hilfsvillage, which the SD commanded. The purpose of this special unit was to conduct special intelligence operations parallel to regular military Wehrmacht Waffen-SS operations, with the main effort of using high technological specialized equipment as long-range radios and special weapons for their agency work. According to Skorzeny's narrative, that members of the SD had to wear the SD rhombus, or police branch color insignia, on their uniform, but he did not, because he was a member of the Waffen-SS, and can also be explained by the aforementioned peculiar personnel structure of the ZBV Friedenthal, but this did not alter the leading command function of the SD, like Skorzeny wanted to claim. For all of Skorzeny's special missions, the wartime media's propaganda played a fateful role in the creation of his personal myth at the time and thereafter. Through German media, Otto Skorzeny not only became famous in Germany, but also in the United States of America, Great Britain, the Soviet Union, and all other of Germany's enemy countries. This fact endured well after the guns fell silent in 1945, granted the remarkable manner that wartime propaganda proved able to outlive its origins. Oh, that's such an important sentence right there. This fact endured well after the guns fell silent in 1945, granted the remarkable manner that wartime propaganda proved able to outlive its origins. Such a true statement. The stories of the gas chambers today still are a perfect example of how wartime propaganda was able to outlive its origins. Today you have to dig for those origins. All right, let me continue. But at that point, German media was not just a single voice, because next to the political influenced civil media, like the NSDAP newspaper Völkischer Beobachter, or the documentary-like news program Deutsche Wochenschau, all military branches had their own news magazines as well as films and radio to inform their own troops and the German population about their battles, victories, and heroes. Most faithful, however, such propaganda of German arms also had the overwhelming strategic goal to increase recruitment of volunteers to serve in especially the SS branch, which until 1942 had been based on such volunteers and not conscription, granted the reputation of the SS as the party elite, a thing in theory that always crashed with reality, that too few persons really existed to fulfill this racial fantasy. The whole German propaganda machine was orchestrated by Reichspropaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels, who controlled German media and directed it based on Adolf Hitler and his political goals. Although the SS had become a star of the German media in the early 1930s from its obscure origins, interestingly, articles which claimed members of the SS as elite and idle increased in 1943. The increase of articles about the SS in Nazi media was not just because of Unternehmen Eich in 1943, but also because of the epic Battle of Charkov in March of 1943 and Adolf Hitler's desire to present this victory in German media in the wake of the Stalingrad defeat and the slow German shift to the defensive on the Eastern Front. In addition to this increase of media presence, the SS had since the autumn of 1942 suffered from a lack of volunteers and started to present itself in media more than before and commenced a media campaign. The prolonged war and the German and Axis people should never forget the glories of the Waffen-SS as being the army of National Socialism. To overcome this lack of volunteers and encourage recruitment of young men into this military branch, such members of the SS as Otto Skorzeny, Kurt Meyer, and Theodor Eich became the embodiment of the soldierly ideal in the SS at arms and gave the media special attention to them. But not only SS internal goals gave a special opportunity to Otto Skorzeny for being represented in the National Socialist media. Parallel to Himmler's need for volunteers, the Waffen-SS was a political model of National Socialist ideology and its concept of a racially superior warrior society composed of heroes. Well, that's not really true by mid to late 1943, where most of the Waffen-SS was comprised of foreign ethnic volunteers. So people still get that part of history wrong. Otto Skorzeny fit perfectly into the role of an ideal Nazi man and new model soldier who still believed into Germany's ability to win the war and stood for National Socialist ideology, since he became a member of the National Socialist German Workers' Party in the early 1930s in the so-called Ostmark, i.e. Austria and specifically Vienna, where as much as Munich was the birthplace of National Socialism. Also, the general trend in the high command for more military decoration and promotion was increasing since the end of 1942. As the military transitioned away from the estate-based army of former times to what was in fact a Nazi people's army with the heroification of men and women of simple social background like Hitler himself. Additionally, the year 1943, i.e. when Goebbels proclaimed a total war effort after the Stalingrad defeat and the Allied called for Germany's unconditional surrender, was a particular challenge for German political leaders and National Socialist propaganda because of the defeat by Soviet troops on the Eastern Front and the coup against Mussolini in Italy. granted Nazi ideology, which relied on martyrdom and heroic deeds as the core of its idea. Now, that's not really true either. The core of its ideology was racial purity. Like, plain and simple. That was it. The German population needed heroes who still believed in Adolf Hitler and ultimate German victory. Joseph Goebbels himself wanted to press the Waffen-SS for more propaganda since 1942 and since 1943 to present a more realistic picture of Waffen-SS soldiers. Interestingly, Lenhart states in his article about Waffen-SS and National Socialist propaganda that the image of the SS developed and produced by the SS and National Socialist media did not just influence the citizens of the Third Reich, but fatefully enough, this heroic image of the Waffen-SS has endured for decades in current, mainly Western media. This generalization, which has major implications for Skorzeny's biography and military reputation, will be supported by focusing on Unternehmen Eich. To summarize the findings of this general critique, it has been shown that the CIA did not take Otto Skorzeny seriously, and that he was not an officer with military leadership skills, and rather was obsessed by technological development. The battalion ZBV Friedenthal was more an intelligence agency than a kind of special operations force, and was led by the SD. The National Socialist and SS propaganda had a need for heroes presented to the population and to the German opponents, latest since beginning of 1943 in the fall of Stalingrad, which gave Otto Skorzeny advantage of being recognized in media in the way he was and still is within the English-speaking countries. All right, that brings us to Unternehmen Eich, and it's about a little more than halfway through this, so we're going to pick up on this tomorrow. I appreciate everybody tuning in, and if you're watching this on Rumble, you can continue with me every day on my podcast, Corey Hughes' Bloody History, available on podcast platforms everywhere. But until tomorrow, that's going to do it for me. Thank you.